Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good morning. It's great to see you. Hi, Karen. Hello.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, Selk family. Hello, Brayers. Hi, Irving. Good morning, good yor. Hello, Henry and Suzanne. Hello, Rick the Great. Who else there? Hello, Joanna.
Henry
and Annette and Abe and Marshall and Hannah. And pretty soon won't be able to see who's there. Hello, David Rose. Shabbat Shalom. It's wonderful to see you. And here we go. We'll get started with we're calling this a Beiteinu service, but in some ways, all of our services have been Beiteinu-like in the last few months, in that we do an abbreviated hop through of Psukei de Zimra with a focus on singing. Oftentimes, we've been doing a text study in lieu of a direct sermon anyway, but we decided Beiteinu needed a Shabbat with them on the in the Kligfeld. So this is Beiteinu Shabbat for the day after Chanukah. Shabbat Shalom Ed, Shabbat Shalom Ronen. We'll begin on page 99 in the Lev Shalom, 61 in the Slim Shalom, and 2 in the Sim Shalom. These simple and profound words that help us feel like it's a luxury to be here and to be breathing and to be alive. Hi, Irving. Modani lefanecha melech chai vekayam, oh sweet harmony. Modani lefanecha melech chai vekayam. Modani lefanecha melech chai vekayam. Modani lefanecha melech chai vekayam. Shechazarta binishmati bechemla Rabba emunatecha. Shechazarta binishmati bechemla Rabba emunatecha. Page 103 or 65 or 10. Again, the order of the services, the Sidurim will be calling as Lev Shalom, Slim Shalom, and then Sim Shalom. So it's 103, 65, or 10. Please rise for Birkot HaShachar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasach v'bina lavchin ben yom u'ben layla.
Amen.
Baruch atah melech haolam shasani betzamo.
Amen.
Baruch atah melech haolam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam bokeh chivrim. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam abi sharumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam matir asurim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokif kifufim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam roka artz al hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamichin mitzadei gaver.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shasa likol tzorki.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam ozeh shel bigvura.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam teisha b'tifara.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam hanotein li'ayif koah. Utenenu ayom b'chol yom lechen lechesed rachamim meinecha v'nechol roveinu v'tigmalenu chasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai gomel chasadim tovim Yamo Yisrael. You may be seated 120, 81, or 50, about 8 lines up, depending on the exact arrangement of the prayer on that page. Eilecha Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai etchana. Eilecha Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai etchana. Skip 2 lines. Shema Adonai v'choneini. Adonai ozer li. 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 Let's do some more Shabbat Shaloms as I see more faces. Shabbat Shalom to Ronan and Adi. Shabbat Shalom to Tamar. Shabbat Shalom to Larry and Diane and to Howard. And Shabbat Shalom to Brent and to Debbie in San Diego and to Gary. Shabbat Shalom to the Good Glicks and happy anniversary to the Good Glicks. Today is their what number anniversary? A very large, beautiful number anniversary for Sandy and Bill.
Indeed.
Shabbat Shalom to Rabbi Susan Lemley and John. Shabbat Shalom to A, whose name is not yet appearing on the screen, but who's
I
connecting to
believe
audio.
it's Annette.
Annette, got it.
Yes.
All those who are mourning or observing your side, please rise for Mourner's Kaddish on page 121. In fact, Ronen, if you can be unmuted or unmute yourself, please lead us in Mourner's Kaddish.
Okay. Thank you. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן.
Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Umei Almaya.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי דקודשה בריחו.
Brichu.
לעילם מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיה לחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Amen. Please rise 122, 83, or 54. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam Baruch Baruch Hoseh Bereshit Baruch Shemo Baruch Omer Ve'oseh Baruch Baruch Gozer Umekayem Baruch Shemo Baruch Merachem Al Haaretz Baruch Baruch Merachem Al Habriot Baruch Shemo Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov L'Reyav Baruch Baruch Chai La'ad V'Kayam Lanetzach Baruch Shemo Baruch B'Dematzio Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. Yahachid Cheolamim Melech Meshubachim for their Shemo Agado Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Mehulal Batishbachot. May be seated 126 or 86 or 58 at different places on those pages. Hoshia et amecha ubarech et nachlatecha ureim 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 menasem ad haolam Hoshia et amecha ubarech et nachlatecha ureim 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 menasem ad haolam. It's impossible for me to hear and sing that verse, that song, without having wistfulness about the Simchat Torah that really ought to have been and wasn't, because it's such an iconic song for Simchat Torah. Next year, God willing, we'll be back to Simchat Torah as usual. 128, 88, or 62, it's an acrostic. We go to the line beginning with a mem about halfway in. Mi ha'ish chafetz chaim ohev yamim lirotov. Mi ha'ish chafetz chaim ohev yamim lirotov. Again. Mi ha'ish chafetz chaim ohev yamim lirotov. Mi ha'ish chafetz chaim ohev yamim lirotov. Netzor, netzor, leshoncha meira, usefatecha midaber mir masur meira, vasetov bakei shalom verodfehu. Netzor, netzor, leshoncha meira, usefatecha midaber mir masur meira, vasetov bakei shalom verodfehu. want to point out a beautiful short piece of psychological wisdom on the left side of the page if you're in the Lev Shalem by Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshischa, one of the great Hasidic masters from a great town. What's that?
One of the great names, too.
One of the great names, too. Yes. One day we will reestablish Temple Beth Am East in Pshischa.
With Rabbi Simcha Bunim.
With Simcha Bunim or his descendants.
Yeah.
So chapter 34 of the book of Psalms seems to lay out in the middle of it a recipe. It asks a question and it seems to answer it. Mi ha'ish, who is the person? Hechafetz chaim, who really wants to desire life, wants to live life fully. Ohev yamim, it's hard to know if this is part of the question or the answer. Like, is this part of what this person desires or this is part of the recipe? One who loves days, interesting phrase, lir'ot tov, to see good. And then what seems to be clearly the answer is, if you want to achieve that, netzor leshoncha meira, hold your tongue from evil, usfatecha midaber mirma, and your lips from speaking terribly about other people. Sur meira, depart, flee, run away from evil. Va'aset tov, and do good. Bake shalom v'rod fehu, request peace, pursue it, and go after it. Sur meira is an interesting phrase because to say to someone that you're supposed to depart from evil, that can be interpreted numerous ways. Don't do evil things. That seems to be the most obvious. Don't hang around with people who do evil things. Run away from it. Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshischa, understanding this as part of the recipe for how you get to enjoy your life, says the following. Look at the left side of the page. What does depart from evil mean in this case? It means to stop obsessing over all the wrongs you have committed. That's a subtle difference between saying depart from evil means stop doing evil things. Run away from your obsession with how flawed you are. We're all flawed. Rather, let go of your guilt and just go out and do good, right? It's possible in a lot of situations when we focus on the negative, certainly the negative tissue in a system, in a relational system, that so much attention goes to the toxicity that we don't have enough time left to support the beauty, right? I think of that in groups all the time, right? Oftentimes the squeaky wheel gets the attention, and it's a healthier thing to let the squeaky wheel tire itself out and rather uphold and bolster and shine light on the good and the sweet. So it's also important as a Jew and as an individual to be self-effacing and to recognize the things within us that need attention. But if we obsess over that, think of all the hours that we are not doing good because we're simply trying to figure out all the things that we've done wrong. And so I love this as a recipe. How do you want to be someone who is in the category of Ohev Yamim, who really loves days, Lir'ot Tov, seeing good in them? Just go do good. You have an opportunity this moment, this day, to fill up the life that you live and the life around you with Tov, with true goodness. Please turn to page 132. Please rise. 132, 92, or 72 for Hallel Hagadol, the great Hallel. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasto. Hodu le'Elohei ha'Elohim ki le'olam chasto. Hodu l'Adonai ha'adonim ki le'olam chasto. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov ki le'olam chasto. שבשפלנו זכר לנו כי עולם חסדו, ויפרקנו מצרינו כי עולם חסדו, נותן לחם לכל בשר כי עולם חסדו, הודו לאל השמיים כי לעולם חסדו. May be seated 134, around 94 and 75 in the other Sidurim. I don't have the exact page. The Psalm for Shabbat. Mizmor Shir Leyom HaShabbat Tov Lehodot Ladonai Tov Lehodot Ladonai Ulezamer Leshimcha Elyon Tov Lehodot Ladonai Lehagid Baboker Chastecha Lehagid Baboker Chastecha Ve'emunatcha Baleilot Ve'emunatcha Baleilot Tov Lehodot Adonai. Last two lines of the same psalm. Od yenuvun beseva deshenim berananim yiyu lehagid ki ashar Adonai suri velo avlata bo. Ashrei 136 or 96 or 81. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Ojalu Chasel Hashem Shekachalo Hashem Shadonai Eloha. We move to the last line of the Ashrei, Debbie Friedman's beautiful tune. V'anachnu nevarech ya me'ata b'yad olam, me'ata b'yad olam, me'ata b'yad olam, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Rabbi Schatz and I would like to linger in Psukei de Zimra all morning, all day in fact, but at some point we have to move to Shachri and Torah service, so we're going to skip. Rabbi Schatz, are you more of an Anava Tehillah mood or a Leonard Cohen mood?
Because we get to sing together, I think more of a Leonard Cohen mood.
All right. So then let's move.
Does everyone know that we're singing? I'm in the ballroom and Rabbi Kligfeld's in the same. Yeah, that's obvious to everybody. Okay.
We're about 70 feet away, but this way we can hear one another's voices, and you can hear a little bit of harmony, which otherwise is impossible in Zoom. So move to page 141 or page 100 or page 88 as we sing out this beautiful tune of Leonard Cohen of blessed memory to the last psalm of the book of Psalms, imagining what it might have been like to worship in the temple, right? The worship in the temple with this orchestra, with the harp and the lyre and the timbrel and the dance, and praising God at the end with every breath. I love, by the way, that that's how the psalm ends. Sometimes people point this to me and say, Rabbi, isn't this proof that they had instruments in the temple, and shouldn't we have instruments in our synagogue on Shabbat? And I say, but I consider the last line of the psalm, which is the last line of Psalms, to almost be, if you'll excuse the phrase, the trump card of the whole idea, which is that, yes, you can have shofar and you can have nevil and chinor and tof machol, but what is this all about? Kol haneshama, with every breath that you breathe, with the instrument embedded in your vocal cords, to Hallelujah. That's how God's name is praised most exquisitely. Hallelujah, bekodsho, Hallelujah, birkia uzo, Hallelujah, bigevurotai. kulo. Hallelu beteka shofar. Hallelu benevel bechinor. Hallelujah. 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 Betofu macho. Hallelujah. Beminim beugav. Hallelujah. Betzil tzilei shama. Hallelujah. Betzil tzilei trua. Kolan shama hallelujah. Kolan shama hallelujah. 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 Please rise for Az Yashir, page 143, 102, or 92. Az Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael Tashir Ozal Adonai Rai v'imulei mor Asher Naki Guga'a Sus v'rachvo Rama Bayam Ohozi Bezimrat Yah Vayehili Lishua Ohozi Bezimrat Yah Vayehili Lishua Ozi Bezimrat Yah Vayehili Lishua Ozi Bezimrat Yah Vayehili Lishua. Kila Adonai Mlucha Masha Bagoyim Alu Moshim B'Yartzil Nishbadet Har Eisa Vaytal Adonai Mlucha Vayadonai L'Melech HaKol Haaretz Bayom Hahu Yadonai Echad Ushemo Echad. You may be seated for Nishmat 145, 104, or 334. When we did Shabbat Hafucha a few weeks ago, where we started with Musaf, then Haftorah, then Torah service, then Shacharit, then Psukei de Zimra. One of the delightful things about that, aside from the notion of inverting the attendance, although that didn't really happen the same way in COVID, right? In a non-COVID world, Psukei de Zimra has just a few people in the room, and by Musaf, the room is pretty full. And the original idea of Shabbat Hafucha is that we should have the room full for Psukei de Zimra. The lovely thing about it is that services end with this. Mm-hmm. Services end with the end of Psukei de Zimra, Nishmat Kochai, that the breath of every living thing, Tevarech et Shimcha, will bless your name. Tevarech also means to increase what your name means in the world. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai our God. And it's a wonderful way to begin and to end a prayer experience. Nishmat Kol Chai Tivarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Nishmat Kol Chai תברך את שמך אדוני אלוהינו ינני היי הו היי היי hanai ai dai dai hanai ai ai oh ai ai hanai ai 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 hai ai ai oh ai 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 dai hanai ai ai oh Harai, ai, dai, dai, ai, ai, yadadai, ai. Mi melach umi yishvelach umi aroch lach el hagdol hagibor b'yanora el hayon koneh shamayim ba'aretz nalchan shabechacha unefa'ercha nebrechat shem kodshacha kamor David Barchinav Shetaranai Bechol Kravaya Chem Kocho El V'Tatzumot Uzecha Hagadol Bichvot Shemecha Hagimor Lanezach B'Yanora Benorotecha Melech HaYoshev Al Kisei Ram Benisa. We're about to move into Shacharit. We'll do Shacharit a little bit briefer. We luxuriated in Psukei Zimra, but we also want to leave time, obviously, for the Torah reading and for our Torah discussion later on. So I'll just give you a quick run through. We begin with Shochein Ad on 147 or 105 or 336. We're going to skip the Baruch Hu. After the Baruch Hu is skipped, we continue through the Shacharit service, the blessing after the Baruch Hu, the Shema, and the blessings after the Shema, and we get to the Amidah. We're going to do it quietly rather than sing it all out loud. So we'll do it quietly as individuals and then move into the Torah service. There are also some faces I can see that I hadn't welcomed yet, and I love welcoming people by name. So Shabbat Shalom to Tzvi, and Shabbat Shalom to Jeff and Margaret, and Shabbat Shalom to Rebecca, and Shabbat Shalom to Jennifer Lowe and her doggy, but I don't see her doggy. And I see other faces, but I can't, they're too far away. I can't, let me, hold on one second. I want to see who they are. There's some faces, but for some reason the room is dark and the camera is far away that I don't even know who I'm saying hello to. So Shabbat Shalom to all of you. I like welcoming you all by name, and I know there are people I'm not even seeing on my screen. But as soon as I see a new face on the screen that I recognize, I will welcome you and say Shabbat Shalom to you. Page 147, Rabbi Schatz, is this I or you?
Whichever you would prefer.
B'vakasha, Shochein Ad.
Okay. Shochein Ad Maharam V'Kadosh Shemo.
Shochein Ad Maharam V'Kadosh Shemo.
להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדל, לברך, להלל, לקלס, על כל דברי שירה ותשבחות, דוד בן ישי, עבדך משיחך.
Please rise, Yishtabach.
ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. על המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ. ברכות והודות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני המלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודות אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך מלכי העולמים.
Amen. We skip to right after the Baruch Hu, the blessing right after the Baruch Hu on 149, 107, or 340. And now again, you may be seated.
ברוך אתה אדוני המלך המייצר מהחושך עושה שלום ובריא את הכל.
הכל ידוך והכל ישבחוך.
המאיר לארץ ודלים וחמים. אין כערכך אדוני אלוהינו בעולם הזה, ואין זולתך מלכנו לחיי עולם הבא. אפס פלטך גואלנו לימות המשיח, ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים. אל אדון
על כל המעשים ברוך ומבורא בפי כל נשמה, גודלו וטובו מלא עולם, דעת ותבונה סובבים אותו.
המתגאה חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה זכות ומישור לפני כיסו חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ובשכל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה נאווה זיוום בכל העולם שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם עושים בהם הרצון קונם פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמו צלה ורינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ויזרח אור רעה והקיף צורת הלבנה שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרום תפארת וגדולה שרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש תתברך משינו שבח מעשה ידיך ואמרי אור שעשית יפרוך הסלע תתברך זרם הקידום וגלים בקודש כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים וכולם עושים באימה וברע רצון קונם וכולם פותחים מפיהם בתשב טהרה בשירה וזמרה מברכים ומשבחים מפארים ומעריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם כולם כאחדונים ואומרים ביראה
קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך כל הארץ כבודו
ואתה משבחים ואומרים ברוך אדוני ממקומו ברוך נמתתנו לך אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות אהבה רבה אהבתנו אדוני אלוהינו חמלה גדולה יותר והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו כי אל פועל ישועת אתה ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת להודות לך וליחדך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר במו ישראל באהבה אל מלך נאמן שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת, ויציב ונכון
ויציב ונכון וקיים, וישב ונעמד וכו'.
לדור והדור הוא קיים ושמו קיים, וכיסו נכון ומלכותו ומלכותו ליד קיימת.
ולרב חיים וקיים, הנה אני נחמדים, לעילוי מעולה אבנים.
אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, פודנו מצילים אל שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך,
עזרת אבותינו, אתה הוא מעולם מגנו מושיע, לבני מלכים בכל דור ודור.
תהילה לעליון ברוך ומבורך משה ובני ישראל לכנו שירה בשמחה רבו ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילה אוסף אלה שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ינאי 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 צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופתחנו מחד יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. Odi Shama, Bere Yehuda, Ubechutot, Yerushalayim, Odi Shama, Bere Yehuda, Ubechutot, Yerushalayim, Kol Sason, Vekol Simcha, Kol Chatan, Vekol Kala, Kol Sason, Vekol Simcha, Kol Ahuv, Vekorea, ay, 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 na 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 ya na ya na, ay, 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 na 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 yo, oh, ay, na na ya na ya na, ay, na na na, ya na na ya na 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 ya na 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 na.
Whose Odi Shama is that?
That is Joey Weisenberg's.
Is that a new one?
Yeah, it's
Beautiful.
really, really beautiful. And I thought that if you got to say happy anniversary to my grandparents, I could at least sing something for a happy anniversary to my grandparents. We're going to begin the Torah service, really just the Torah reading. Marshall Kramer will be reading Torah for us this morning. And Marshall, in true fashion, knowing that you are more prepared than I in this moment, I didn't write down what verse you are starting on. So if you tell us what verse, I will tell us what page.
You'll be starting with chapter 41, verse 53, found on
Great.
page 257.
Ah, you're even prepared with the page number. Fantastic. So Genesis chapter 41, verse 53. That's what I thought you said. Okay, verse 53.
Okay.
All you.
And I'll start with a bracha for study of Torah found in Sidur Lev Shalem on 107 or in Slim Shalom on 63. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai our God, sovereign of time and space, who has provided us with a path to holiness through the observance of mitzvot, and has instructed us to engage with the words of Torah. That which would be the first aliyah. Vatichlena sheva shnei hasava asher haya be'eretz Mitzrayim. Vatichilena sheva shnei harav lavo kasher amar Yosef. Vahi ra'av b'chol ha'aratzot uv'chol eretz Mitzrayim haya lachem. Vatirav kol eretz Mitzrayim, vayitzak ha'am el paro lalachem, vayomer paro lechol Mitzrayim, lechu el Yosef, asher yomar lachem ta'asuhu. V'harav haya al kol pnei haaretz, vayiftach Yosef, et kol asher bahem, vayishbor leMitzrayim, Vayechezak hara'av v'eretz Mitzrayim, v'chol ha'aretz ba'u Mitzrayma lishbor el Yosef, ki chazak hara'av v'chol ha'aretz. Chapter 42, verse 1. Vayar Yaakov ki yeshever b'Mitzrayim, vayomer Yaakov livanav lama titra'u. Vayomer hine shamati ki yeshever b'Mitzrayim, redu shama v'shivru lanu misham, v'nichye v'lo namut. Vayeredu ache Yosef asara, lishbor bar mimitzrayim, v'et binyamin achi Yosef, lo shalach Yaakov et echav, ki amar pen yikra'enu ason. Vayavo'u b'nei Yisrael lishbor b'toch habaim ki haya hara'av be'eretz Canaan. Starting with verse 6. V'Yosef hu hashalit al haaretz hu hamashbir l'chol am haaretz vayavo'u achei Yosef vayishtachavu lo apayim arza vayahar Yosef et echav vayakireim vayitnaker alehem vaydaber itam kashot vayomer alehem me'ayin batem, vayomeru me'eretz Canaan lishbor ochel, vayaker Yosef et echav, vehem lo hikiruhu, vayiskor Yosef et hachalomot, asher chalam lahem, vayomer alehem miragalim atem lirot, et irvat haaretz batem, Vayomaru elav lo Adoni, va'avadecha ba'u lishbor ochel, kulanu b'nei ish echad nachnu, kenim anachnu, lo hayu avadecha miragalim, vayomer alehem, lo kirvat haaretz batem lirot, vayomeru. Shenem asar avadecha achim anachnu b'nei ish echad be'eretz Canaan v'hinei hakatonet avinu hayom v'echad einenu vayomer alehem Yosef hu asher dibarti alechem lemor meraglim atem bizoti b'cheinu Hey, Pharaoh, im tetzu mize ki im bevo achichem hakaton heina shilchu mikem echad v'yikach et achichem v'yatem he'asefru v'yibachanu divrechem ha'amet itchem v'im lo hey Pharaoh ki meragalim atem Vayesof otam el mishmar shaloshet yamim. Vayomer alehem Yosef. Vayom hashalishi zotasu vichyu. Eto Elohim ani yareh. Verse 19. Ki im kenim atem achichem echad yaser beved mishmarchem. V'atem lechu haviu shever ra'avon batechem v'et achichem hakaton taviu elai v'yamenu divrechem v'lo tamutu v'ya'asu chen v'yomeru ish el achiv achval ashemim anachnu al achinu asher ra'inu Tzarat nafsho b'hitchano elenu v'lo shamanu al kein ba'a elenu hatzara hazot vayan Reuven otam lemor halo amarti alechem lemor al techetu v'yeled v'lo shematem V'gam damo hine nidrash, v'hem lo yadu ki shomea Yosef, ki hamelitz benotam, v'yisov me'alehem v'yef, v'yashov alehem v'ydaber alehem, v'yikach me'itam et Shimon, v'yesorotam linehem, v'yitzav Yosef, v'yimalu et Kalehem bar ulashiv kaspehem ish el sako v'lated lahem seda ladarech v'yas lahem kain v'yisu et shivram chamorehem v'yiluchu misham v'yiftach ha'achad et sako latet mispo Lachamoro b'malon, vayar et kaspo, v'hinehu b'fi amtachto, vayomer el echav, hushav kaspi, v'gam hine v'amtachti, vayetze libam, vayecherdu, ish el achiv lemor, mazot asa Elohim lanu.
Yeah, Koach, Marshall, in a moment, Rabbi Kligfeld will lead us in a Misha Berach. But I just want, Rabbi Kligfeld will lead us in Misha Berach. Okay. I want to make sure you heard me. But first, I wanted to just say, Rabbi Kligfeld and I were trying to decide what we were going to talk about this Shabbat, and it's always lovely when there's a plethora of ideas and things to pull from in a particular week. And one of the things that we talked about that we are not going to be teaching, so I can mention it, is that there is something powerful about thinking about the rations of food and how the people reacted to those rations of food and what we are experiencing right now with a vaccine. Who is getting it, how it is helping people, how the decisions are being made as to who gets it, what people are doing to try to get it. And just those parallels are very profound in both our Torah and also in our world right now. So as we go into the Misha Berach, obviously a blessing that we are hoping for those who need healing to receive it, we can also be thinking about how our Torah is teaching us how to deal with moments when we have access to the ability to heal others and help others find healing. And I just wanted to say, since a few other people joined us, hello to David. Maybe that was the person who Rabbi Kligfeld couldn't see because it got brighter in his room. And to the Litovs and Devorah Kolker, I am so glad you are here. It makes me very happy to see your name, that it all worked. And to Mark and to Miriam and to Judy Weintraub. And I think that Lori Tessel and AJ, Shabbat Shalom.
It's interesting. We're looking at different screens, so you see people that I don't see. That's so nice.
Yeah.
Because I'm so glad you welcomed them. I think everyone that I can see, I have welcomed.
Wonderful.
Okay, we'll say Misha Berach for Cholim. And as Rabbi Schatz intimated, there's no rationing when it comes to blessing. There's no scarcity when it comes to how we can offer a tefillah. Everyone can be included. Misha Berach Abateinu Avram Yitzhak v'Yaakov Imotenu Tzar Rivka Rachel v'Leah Vivarech v'Rapeh Kol HaCholim v'Kol HaCholot B'Kila Kedosha Hazot Et Zahava Yafa Bat Esther V'Et Nima Bat Malka V'Et Rivka Bat Pesha V'Et Arnarella Bat Yehudit V'Et Leah Fredel Bat Bracha Kreinel V'Et Catherine Bat Sarah V'Et Stanley Greitzer V'Et Leah Bat Freya V'Et Harab Yaakov Baruch Ben Uri B'Chava V'Et Yosef Menachem Mendel Ben Gittel V'Et Yehuda Ben Abraham V'Et Sarah V'Et Fredel Bat Rachel V'Et Goodman Wolfman from Agutta V'et Metuga Sarah Bat Sheno Golda V'Et Bat Bela Esther Gittel Bat Fega V'et Ben Zion Ben Gittel V'et Chaya Bat Sarah V'et Yaakov Ben Abraham V'et Yoel Ari Ben Esther V'et Eliyahu Ben Shena Shira V'et Yelena Kramer V'et Yehudi Bat Libet Sivia V'et Yitzchak Yaakov Ben Paya V'et Israel Ben Alfrieda V'et Aaron Avram Ben Adina V'et Yosef Ben Yeta V'et Rivka Bat Nachama V'et Shmuel Mordechai Ben Eliyahu Ben Tova V'Eliyahu Chaim V'et Neshama Rachel Bat Sarah V'et Chava Bat Yaakov V'et Sonia V'et Yitzchak Ben Leah V'et Hillel Ben Yaakov V'et Shilchana Bat Tzivia V'et Alan Garei V'et Ezra Ben Rachmiel Ufreda V'et Job Ben Flora V'et Golda Bat Fega V'et Esther Bat Liba V'et Rizachana Bat Chasya Gula V'et Avram Simcha Ben Avram B'Sarah V'et Harab Eliezer Ben Sion Ben Chaya Golda V'et Sarah Tzirel Bat Miriam V'et Yisrael Bat Korin V'et Menachem Ben Lily V'et Pesach Yitzchak Ben Yehudit V'et Natan David Ben Baruch Umina V'et Sylvia Kaufman V'et El Sagab Sagi Ben Shoshana V'et Baruch Ruvain Ben Abraham V'et V'kol hacholim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Malei Rachmim Lehem Lachzikam Larapotam V'Shlach Lehem Mehira Fuash Lema Min Hashamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'toch Shar HaCholim V'chazek Et Yidei Askim B'tzorcheihem Shabbat Mulizok Ufoa Krova Lavo Hashta Bagalav Izman Kariv V'nomar Amen.
Amen.
We wish everyone a full and speedy recovery, and hello to Jennifer Lowe's dog.
We'll continue now with the fifth aliyah as Marshall Kramer is unmuted and continues the Torah reading for us.
Okay, we're on page 262 if you have the Eitz Chaim Chumash, chapter 42, verse 29. Vayavo'u el Yaakov avihem arza Canaan, vayagidu lo et kol hakorot otam lemor, diber ha'ish Adonai haaretz itanu kashot, vayiten otanu kim ragalim et haaretz, vanomer elav kenim anachnu lo hayinu meragalim. 12 אנחנו אחים בני אבינו, האחד איננו והקטון היום את אבינו בארץ כנען, ויאמר אלינו, האיש אדוני הארץ, בזאת אדע כי כנים אתם, אחיכם האחד, הניחו איתי, ואת רעבון בתיכם קחו ולכו, והביאו את אחיכם הקטון אליי, ואדע כי לא מרגלים אתם, כי כנים אתם, את אחיכם אתן לכם, ואת הארץ תשכרו. ויהי הם מריקים שקיהם, והנה איש צרור כספו בשקו, ויראו את צרורות כספיהם, המה ואביהם, ויראו. ויאמר עליהם יעקב אביהם, אותי שיקלתם, יוסף איננו, ושמעון איננו, ואת בנימין תיקחו, עלי היו כולנה. ויאמר ראובן אל אביו לאמור, את שני בני תמיד, אם לא אביאנו אליך, תנה אותו על ידי, ואני אשיבנו אליך. ויאמר לא ירד בני עמכם, כי אחיו מת, והוא לבדו נשאר. וקראהו אסון בדרך אשר תלכו בה, והורתם את שיבתי ביגון שאולה. Next, starting with chapter 43, verse 1. והרעב כבד בארץ, ויהי כאשר כילו לאכול את השבר, אשר הביאו ממצרים, ויאמר עליהם אביהם, שובו, שברו לנו מעט אוכל. ויאמר אליו יהודה לאמור, העד העיד בנו האיש לאמור, לא תראו פניי, בלתי אחיכם איתכם. אם ישך משלח את אחינו איתנו, נרדה ונשברה לך אוכל. ואם אינך משלח לו נרד, כי האיש אמר אלינו, לא תראו פניי, בלתי אחיכם איתכם. ויאמר ישראל, למה הראותם לי, להגיד לאיש העוד לכם אח. ויאמרו, שאל האיש, לנו ולמולדתנו לאמור, העוד אביכם חי, היש לכם אח, ונגד לו על פי הדברים האלה, הידוע נדע, כי יאמר הורידו את אחיכם. Continuing with verse 8. ויאמר יהודה אל ישראל אביו, שילחה הנער איתי ונקומה ונלך, ונחיה ולא נמות, גם אנחנו, גם אתה, גם טפנו. אנוכי אערבנו מידי תבקשנו אם לא הביאותיו אליך והצגתיו לפניך וחטאתי לך כל הימים כי אילולא התמהמהנו כי עתה שבנו זה פעמיים ויאמר עליהם ישראל אביהם אם כן איפה זאת עשו קחו מזמרת הארץ בכליכם והורידו לאיש מנחה מעט צורי ומעט דבש נחות ועלות בוטנים ושקדים וכסף משנה קחו בידכם ואת הכסף המושב בפיו אמתחותיכם תשיבו בידכם אולי משקהו ואת אחיכם קחו וקומו שובו אל האיש ואל שדי ייתן לכם רחמים לפני האיש ושילח לכם את אחיכם אחר ואת בנימין ואני כאשר שקלתי ויקחו הנשים את המנחה הזאת ומשנה כסף לקחו בידם ואת בנימין ויקומו וירדו מצרים ויעמדו לפני יוסף.
Yasher Koach, Marshall, that was a ton of Torah reading, and you always do it just with so much poise and proficiency. And it's lovely to be able to call this a Beiteinu service and have you as our Torah reader, since you are so often our Beiteinu Torah reader. So thank you for being here this morning. Our Haftorah is going to be read by Debbie Mishik. I'm just going to give you all a brief little introduction to Debbie. In 2015, Rabbi Kligfeld, I think, Rabbi Kligfeld asked me if there would be any interest in having some kind of conference here at Temple Beth Am to show them things that we had put together, like Sovev and Hamalot and meditation minyan and all these kinds of things that we've done that have been a little bit out of the box for prayer services. And I said, sure, sounds great. And then so it must have been 2016. And then I immediately graduated. And I was very involved in making sure the Kol Tefillah happened the first year. And Debbie came with members of her shul and enjoyed it and decided that not only did she enjoy it, but that what the dream that we had, which was to have people come to Beth Am, learn something, and then take it back to their communities, she said, I'm ready. I'm going to do this. And in fact, she still has a minyan called Kol Tefillah, which is similar, I think, Debbie, to like what we do for Sovev. And she brought the ruach, she brought the intentionality, she brought some of the tunes even back to her community. And for the past few years that we've had Kol Tefillah, Debbie has been a major part of that community and that leadership. And because of this pandemic, Debbie is able to join our community and is probably the newest member on our Zoom screen right now. And it is just so lovely to have you as part of our community officially. Even though you live in San Diego, it means that you're able to connect with us via a screen. And I'm so glad that Rabbi Kligfeld and I could bring some harmonies this morning, because it really is the thing that brought you so much joy here at Temple Beth Am. So thank you for joining us and for reading this Haftarah on the anniversary of your bat mitzvah. And we will now turn to page 271, and Debbie will read for us the Haftorah without any blessings, and soon when we are able to be together again, we will include those blessings. But for now, just page 271, and Debbie, the floor is yours.
ויקץ שלמה והנה חלום ויבוא ירושלים ויעמוד לפני ארון ברית אדוני ויעלות וישלמים ויעש משתם לכל עבדיו אז תבואנה שתיים, נשים זונות אל המלך, ותעמודנה לפניו, ותאמר האישה אחת, בי אדוני אני, האישה הזאת יושבות בבית אחד, ולדימה בבית, ויהי ביום השלישי לליתי ותלד גם אישה הזאת, ואנחנו יחדיו. אין זר איתנו בבית, זולתי שתיים אנחנו בבית, ויעמד בין האישה הזאת לילה אשר שכבה עליו, ותקם בתוך הלילה, ותיקח את בני מאצלי, במתחה ישנה, ותשכיבהו בהיקה, ואת בנה המת השכיבה בהיקי, ויקום בבוקר להניק את בני, והנה מת, ואת פונן אליו בבוקר, והנה לא היה בני אשר ילדתי, ותאמר האישה האחרת לא, כי בני החי ובני חמת, וזאת אומרת לא, כי בני חמת ובני החי, ותדברנה לפני המלך, ויאמר המלך, זאת אומרת זה בני החי ובני חמת, וזאת אומרת לא, היא בני חמת ובני החי. ויאמר המלך קחו לי הערב, ויביאו הערב לפני המלך, ויאמר המלך כזרו את הילד החי לשניים, ותנו את החצי לאחת ואת החצי לאחת. ותאמר האישה אשר בנה החי אל המלך, כי נגמרו רחמך על בנה, ותאמר בי אדוני תנו לה את ילוד החי והמת תמיתוהו, וזאת אומרת גם לי גם לך לא יהיה גזרו. ויען המלך ויאמר תנו לה את הילוד החי והמת לא תמיתוהו עמו, וישמעו כל ישראל את המשפט אשר שפט המלך, ויראו מפני המלך, כי ראו כי חכמת אלוהים בקרבו לעשות משפט. ויהי המלך שלמה מלך הכל Israel.
Yasher koach, Debbie, thank you for sharing your beautiful voice, and Mazal Tov on your bat mitzvah anniversary. We will continue now with the prayer for our country and the prayer for Israel. Rabbi Kligfeld, would you like to lead one and I'll lead the other?
Sure.
Great. I'll lead the prayer for the country. Okay. On page 176 in the Lev Shalem. I don't know the other page numbers because you have them.
It's around 148 in the Slim Shalom and 414 in the Sim Shalom.
Great.
177 in the left Shalom.
Yep, thank you. That was where I was confused too. Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessing upon this land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you have decreed, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. Adonai, God whose spirit is in all creatures, we pray that your spirit be awakened within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from our hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant love and companionship, peace and friendship among the many peoples and faiths who dwell in our nation. Grant us the knowledge to judge justly, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the understanding and courage to root out poverty from our land. May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth, and may you cause all peoples to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me, and let us say Amen.
Amen. A prayer for the state of Israel, 149 or 416. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael begohalo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael begohalo. Barechet Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Geulateinu, Hagein Aleha Be'avrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shelomecha. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael begohalo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael begohalo. Ushlach orcha v'mitcha l'rasheha, sareha v'yoatzeha, ותקנם ביצה טובה מלפניך, חזק את ידי בגני ארץ קודשנו, והנחילם אלוהינו ישועה, ועטרת ניצחון תעטרם, ונתת שלום בארץ, ושמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר Amen. I think we'll go straight into our Torah discussion right now. So, is that okay with you, Rabbi Schatz?
Yes, we just have to make sure before we end services to do Ashrei for Larry Herman, because I always promise that if he's here, we'll do Ashrei.
Let's do Ashrei.
Oh, we're going to do Ashrei right now.
181, 151, and 420. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yelu Chaseh L'Hashem Shekach Lo Shem Shenai Lo Avdi Lo Avdi. Tilat Adonai yidaber pi v'recho basar shengot shol elam ba'ed v'anachnu nevarech ya mi'ata v'ad olam hallelujah. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
There's no source sheet that went out, but we're going to be referring to a lot of sources, but almost all of them are in the Chumash. So if you have an Eitz Chaim Chumash, please keep it in front of you. And if you don't have an Eitz Chaim Chumash, we won't just call pages. We will give you chapter and verse. There'll be one or two sources that we're going to look at that you'll just have to listen to. But most everything will be in the Chumash itself. Here's how I want to begin this. Some of you know, because I mention it with some frequency, that of the people that I love to read and listen to, and that changes as I change. I go on kicks of reading sometimes the entire canon by one author, and then I move to the next author in the nonfiction world. Right now, I'm definitely in a Malcolm Gladwell fix and enjoying his writing, which I always have, and particularly his podcasts. He has a phenomenal podcast from a couple of years ago that tries to understand the difference between classic modern rock and roll music on the one hand and country music on the other hand. Raise your hand if you're a country music fan. Some of you, okay? I can enjoy it here and there. I don't think I've ever intentionally bought a country music album, but I have no expertise in it, but sometimes a country music song will appeal to me. And what Malcolm Gladwell notes is that so much of country music, when you listen to it, it makes you cry. Much more frequently, I forgot what study he showed, than listening even to weepy-ish songs from the rock genre. And he goes into an hour-long investigation as to why. And what he pulls out from this investigation is that the difference between rock music that focuses on sad themes and country music that focuses on sad themes is that the former, in general, stays in generalities, broad images, broad themes about sad things, whereas the latter is hyper-specific. You listen to a country music song about illness or a breakup of a relationship or the tensions in a friendship, and you get very specific imagery and very specific descriptions of what's happening. In most rock music songs over the last 30 or 40, 50 years, the composers of the songs are hovering in general descriptions of those painful parts of life or painful parts of relationship. And what Gladwell pulls out of this is that specificity is the key to unlocking emotions. I remember reading about that in an entire different category elsewhere, which is that as a teacher and as a parent, and I suppose as a supervisor, there is an enormous difference between offering general praise and specific praise. And in fact, it's not only the case that offering specific praise is better, it's also possible that offering generic praise doesn't get experienced by the listener in a positive way. Why? If I say to my child, that is an amazing painting, unconsciously, they might be thinking that their threshold to gain my praise is amazingness, and not everything is amazing. But if I say to my child, look at how yellow that sun is on that page, I see the expressions on all of the faces of the people that you drew in that picture. It's specific. It doesn't perpetuate a specific threshold of what is good or what is bad, and it allows them to hear that I'm focusing on details and that I really see what they wrote. I'm not just getting away with, that was great, well done, good job, amazing, right? How often do we say those words and we know they are dripping with nothingness, even though we mean them? But if you can get specific in your description in a song of the particular pain in a family as they're dealing with cancer, you're going to get a tear from someone listening to it. And if you get specific in your praise of a child or an employee or a student, they're going to feel that they were seen, and they're going to try to recreate that feeling by being as accomplished the next time around, and not just searching for an illusory chimerical perfection which doesn't actually exist. Step 3, if it's the case that specificity in how we see someone makes them really feel acknowledged, then I think it's also possible that seeing someone only in vague generalities might make them feel like they're a stranger, that you really don't know them, even if you think that you do. And the reason why I bring all of this in is because Rabbi Schatz and I want to zoom in on some scenes in Parshat Miketz, including some that Marshall read, that through verbal cues indicate to us that the Torah is concerned with and interested in the relationship between being known and being a stranger, being seen and being obscured. And it has to do with the specific things that we know and note about another person, who they are, what they look like, and what they stand for. The verbal game has to do with roots, and you know that I love Hebrew roots that are not etymologically connected. I want to make that clear. Sometimes I play with roots that are etymologically connected, but are alliteratively, there's alliteration there. I don't know how to put that into an adverb, connected, right? So most Hebrew roots, sometimes you can make associations between the first two letters of similar three-letter roots. Sometimes it's two letters of a root, but it's the last two letters of the root that are being played with, not the first two. That's the situation that we're in here, and therefore I don't think they're etymologically sourced, but I think that the Torah is composed in such a way for us to pay attention to them. And the roots that we're talking about are lehakir, to know, and lehit naker, to become a stranger. The root of lehit naker is nun kaf resh nochri, someone who's foreign, who is either not seen or seen only in very convenient ways by the person who wants to see them and keep their foreignness. And lehit naker is to make yourself strange, to allow yourself not to be seen. And lahakir is to notice specifically what someone is and what something is. This relationship, this dance between those two verbs begins in last week's parsha. Actually begins earlier, but we're only going to, because this is a half an hour-ish teaching, not an hour-long teaching, we're going to cull from the many verses we could have looked at. Look briefly at chapter 37 of Breshit, verse 32. Page 232 in the Eitz Chaim, going back to Parshat Vayeshev. This incredibly emotional scene that a country music composer could have written a beautiful song about. When the brothers bring the evidence to Yaakov that Joseph is gone.
Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote about it.
Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it makes me cry. Vayishalchu et ketonat hapasim, they sent the striped garment that was a love gift from Jacob to Joseph. Vayaviu el avihem, they brought it to their father. Vayomru zot matzanu, they said, Dad, we found this. Hakerna, do you recognize it? Oh my God, what a painful question. Do you know whose this is? Do you see the detail in it? This is not just any coat. Do you know what happened, Dad? Hakatonet bincha hi imlo, a terribly painful rhetorical question. Is this your son? We're your sons too. Is this your son's garment or is it not? Of course it is. Hakerna, do you see? Do you recognize? Look a few verses later, chapter 37, verse 33. Actually, not a few verses, the next verse. Vayakira, he knew it. Can you imagine Yaakov's emotions in that moment? This is not just any garment. He recognized it. He saw it for exactly what it was, and therefore there's a full awareness of the horror he's about to experience. Vayomer kutonet beni, yeah, it is my son's garment. Chaya ra'a achalatu, it must be that a wild beast devoured him. Tarof toraf Yosef. He gets to this emotional broken place through hakara, through recognition, through seeing, through specificity. This root is carried over even into the interlude in Parshat Vayeshev last week, the interlude between Judah, Yehuda, and Tamar, which deserves its own attention, which we're not giving it, but that those series of moments where Judah is made to see how wrong he is for having withheld a third son from Tamar, and how wrong he was for treating her the way he did. Chapter 38 of Breshit, verse 25, on page 236 in the Eitz Chaim at the bottom. He mutzeit, Judah said, find that Tamar, who is clearly pregnant through harlotry, and bring her out. She was found. V'hi shalcha el chamiha, and she sent to her father-in-law, Lamor, saying this, Leish asher elalo, to whatever man that these things belong to. What are these things? These are the things that she took as collateral when Judah, thinking of her as a prostitute, slept with her. Anochi hara, I'm pregnant with that person's things. Vatomer, and she said, oh, this would be a great scene for a good movie producer or songwriter to create something out of. Hakerna, do you know? Do you recognize? Do you see who these things belong to? Lemi hachotemet v'aptilim v'amateh ha'ela. Do you know really who these things are connected to? Do you see? And in chapter 38, verse 26, the next verse, Vayaker Yehuda, he couldn't not see them for exactly what they are. They belong to him. Vayomer tzadka mimeni. And he said, you are more righteous than me. So it's his shame and his recognition that comes out through this specific understanding of who these things belong to. They were his. And it's Jacob's torn heart that emerges from recognizing haker, the specific garment that was brought to him that was torn. That's the stuff from Vayeshev. Now we're in Miketz. Turn to chapter 42, verse 7.
Page 259.
Joseph is second in command. He is providing food for all of Egypt. We readers, there's a word for this in literary analysis. We have knowledge that the characters do not, right? We know that the brothers don't know that Joseph is Joseph. We know that Joseph knows that he's Joseph, and we know that Joseph knows that they don't know, right? And we're kind of watching this from above. We know that Joseph is the one that they're going to be asking this question to. They came, the brothers of Joseph, Vayishtachavulu apayim, they bowed down upon their faces to the ground. In that moment, already reifying his prophecy that that's what would happen. Vayar Yosef et achav. Joseph saw his brothers. Vayakirem. There's our verb. He saw them. He knew exactly who they were. The years had not obscured. He saw the details for who they were. You might even say that Vayakirem, and he saw into their hearts as to what kind of brothers they were. And now look at the next word. Vayakirem vayitnaker. Those are the two roots that are not etymologically connected, but I think are thematically connected. He saw them, he knew them for who they were, and he allowed himself not to be seen and be known. I want to say that again. He knew exactly who they were, and his response was, you may not know me, not care. He turned himself into a stranger to them. Vaydaber itam kashod, he spoke to them harshly. And he said, where'd you come from? I suspect you are spies. Look at the next verse, Look at next verse. Verse 8. Vayaker Yosef et achav, that Joseph knew his brothers. Vehem lo hikiruhu. They did not know him hikiruhu because he had made himself into a nochri, a stranger. So there is such a tension in this scene between who knows what, who knows whom, who is seen and who is not seen. Joseph has the power of vision, always had his entire life, and sees them for exactly who they are. And they are rendered blind and see him as a stranger because that's how he's choosing to dress himself up as. And it's a very powerful thing to make yourself a nochri, a stranger in someone else's eyes. It's a very powerless thing by comparison. When you're a stranger in someone else's eyes, not because you want to be, but because they make you that way. Rabbi Schatz?
So before I go into this deeply, I would love to know if there's anybody who has any thoughts as to why this is a problem. Why is it a problem that Joseph, or why is it interesting? It might not be a problem. Why is it interesting that Joseph knows who his brothers are, but Joseph, does everything he can to make sure that they do not know who he is and they don't recognize him? What is it about this particular instance that's interesting or could be an issue to you? I'll go into why I think so, but I'm interested in your thoughts. Yeah, Jeffrey Altman. I don't know if you can unmute yourselves or if Kenji has to, but I'll say your full name so that he knows who you are. Can you unmute? There you go.
There we go. So perhaps the brothers don't know Joseph because when they were younger and they threw him in the pit, they actually treated him like a stranger.
Yeah.
They treated him as if he were not family. And he's hiding himself from them to see if there's anything about them that's changed, whether they have any true character and true honesty at this point.
Great. Great. I thought you were going in a different direction, and I'm so glad that you went in the direction you went in, because there's something very interesting about the fact that the brothers never really even wanted to know him, right? They threw him in a pit. They never really knew him. And so the fact that he was made a stranger to them once, he is now a stranger to them and making himself into a stranger to do exactly what you just mentioned, to allow them the possibility to have grown, to show, no, in fact, you're not a stranger to us. We've grown. We're going to allow you into our, I would say family, but really hearts, right? We'll allow you in. And that can only be done if they've changed, because as you poignantly mentioned, he was a stranger to them always. He was never known to them. Joanna, do you have a thought? I see your virtual hand.
So, sort of building a little bit on what's been said, when you think about how a relationship grows, whether we're talking a brand new relationship that never existed or repairing a severed relationship, you get more specific and you know more and more when the trust develops over time. So at this moment in time, Joseph doesn't yet trust the relationship. He needs to do some more things to see if he feels safe with them, especially in this case, when we're talking about a relationship that has been severed badly. That trust and that sense of safety has to build before Joseph is really willing to get into the specificity about details that will lead to a relationship that is a real relationship built around lehakira, on knowing each other.
Beautiful. There's a sense of trust that needs to be there for him to feel like he wants to be known, or that he can be known. And going back to the verses that Rabbi Kligfeld read for us, that moment with Tamar, she is showing that moment of either lack of trust, or that she knew what was going on, but he didn't know what was going on, right? There was no moment there of actual knowing, because they didn't have a relationship. They didn't actually know one another. There was no way for someone to recognize another if there is not that trust and that honesty that is built in the relationship to get to know the other person. Any other thoughts? Yes, Gabriella Litov. Hold on one second, Gabriella. We're just going to unmute you before you start talking.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Joseph really suffered a great deal. And really it was by a miracle that he became the high vizier of Egypt. Mm-hmm. Because you would have bet that he would have been killed or remained a slave or whatever. So I think, part of it is Joseph is human, and he would like the brothers, he would like them to suffer, because remember, there was a plague in Egypt. Mm-hmm. So he wanted them to really suffer and to really have to go back to their father and convince him, and he accused them of being spies and accused them shabbily. I mean, they deserved it. I think part of us knows that, vengeance sometimes tastes sweet, or even sweeter when it's cold.
Sure. It seems as though Joseph was doing this very knowingly, right? Not to use that word too much here, but he knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to get them to feel the pain, probably not the same amount of pain that he felt when they betrayed him, but to feel as though they really had to work for that which they wanted, which in this case was not relationship, but then ended up being that they needed relationship to get what they wanted. But he was doing, and the rabbis agree with you, he knew that he was making himself unknown to them so that he could get what he wanted in terms of how they would feel and how they would have to work for that which they wanted. So you're picking up on what the rabbis are putting down. Thanks, Gabriella. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Rebecca. There you go.
I think what's interesting here is that he doesn't accuse them of being thieves or any other crime, but rather spying, which again goes back to the knowing and unknowing. And instead of it being a positive thing that they're coming to know him in a good way, he's sort of bringing out the ugly part of getting to know someone when you're not supposed to. So thought it was interesting that plays into those two words as well.
Yeah.
Beautiful, Rebecca. What a beautiful insight.
Yeah, I love that. I had not thought about that, and I really love that. That is a powerful way of thinking about how we also use the ability to get to know something or see something, right? That it can be used for bad or it can be used for good. And the Torah, the Torah uses language very carefully. And the fact that, as you're pointing out, they don't use a different term for what Joseph thought they could be that would be denigrating to them. He uses a way in which seeing something or knowing or recognizing something could be used for evil or could be used against something else.
It's even more interesting if I can interject in the Hebrew, because the Hebrew word for spy in the Torah is a meragel, right? Meragel is from regel, a leg. So to be a meragel is to take yourself somewhere in an exploitative way, right? Yeah. It's to go somewhere to a place or to a person and exploit what you see rather than to see the person or the thing for what it actually is, right? And and that of course gets a lot of play later on in the Torah when the Meraglim go into the land of Israel, and some of them see the land for what it actually is, at least the way the Torah tells the story, and 10 see it just the way they want to see it. Beautiful, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Barbara's hand is up. Yes,
Barbara, you're going to be our last one so that we can move on.
But first, I want to know what you're eating, Barbara, because I'm hungry.
No, you have to unmute yourself. Barbara, unmute yourself. You didn't. You're muted.
There was a second of unmute.
Yes, somebody then muted me. I'm eating pumpkin seed.
Delicious. B'te'avon. The bracha is borei pri ha'adama. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just found them in the cabinet. We bought them a long time ago, and they're so good.
Great.
I think it's not surprising that the brothers didn't recognize Joseph. Because they thought he was dead. And then they come upon this very important man wearing Egyptian robes, looking like an Egyptian because of the way where he's living and where he's clothed. And so it's not surprising that they didn't recognize him. I think that was an important thing, that they couldn't recognize him. They could have just thought, oh, he looked like my brother, but there's no way he was my brother. So they wouldn't even suspect it.
Great. So you're picking up on a really important part, and it will jump into what I'm going to share in a moment, that the important piece of them not recognizing him was that they couldn't imagine that it could be him. Right? Even if he looked the same, the rabbis, I was mentioning this to Rabbi Kligfeld yesterday, the rabbis have a very good time talking about how he didn't have a beard when they saw him last, and now he has a beard, and so the brothers didn't recognize him. That didn't feel so compelling to me, so I didn't focus on that. But the idea here that they couldn't have imagined, whether or not, as you said, whether or not he had similar features, they couldn't have imagined the position that he was now in. They couldn't have imagined that their brother, who they threw into a pit, whether or not they thought he was dead, that he was put to such a low place physically that he could be now brought up to such a high place and in a position to help them. That to them is just completely crazy. How could that be their brother? They would have never even thought to imagine that. So I'm going to bring a few commentaries before I pass it back over to Rabbi Kligfeld. The thing that is most interesting to me about this verse, that some of you have touched on, is this idea that it's important for us to know that they didn't recognize him. Right? Why would the Torah mention it if it wasn't important? And why is it important? Why do we need to know, as the readers of this story, that Joseph knew them, but they did not recognize him? And to go one step further, that he made himself unrecognizable in all the ways that he treated them and he dealt with them in front of him. So Ibn Ezra has a beautiful commentary on this, for which he says he knew immediately, Joseph knew immediately that they were his brothers. Right off the bat, they stood in front of him. He knew, those are my brothers. But only after he examined them more carefully did he know who was who. He needed to spend time getting to not just look them over and say, oh, right, my brother Levi had a freckle on his right cheek, but he needed to actually remember who they were. He spent a lot of time away from them. And so sure, he saw them and knew those are my brothers, but he didn't actually know them. He didn't actually know who they were until he really spent time with them. And then one more piece here from the Or HaChaim says, when Joseph saw them, he felt as their brother and displayed friendliness towards them. It was only from the brother's side that he appeared as a stranger. And this gets back to Rabbi Kligfeld's introduction with the country songs, for which my dad loves country music, so I know it very well. That there's feeling there. He felt as though they were his brothers. He didn't necessarily, at least according to the Or HaChaim, he's not saying, oh, they look the same, but he feels a sense of camaraderie. He feels like they are family. He feels something for these people that he needs to now take care of. So in that way, he is recognizing them because he feels something for them that he hasn't felt for anybody else except for them. And the brothers, why do they not know who he is? Because they don't feel anything towards him. They don't see him as their brother, as Joseph, as this sibling. Even if they felt jealousy, that would be a feeling. But they don't feel anything towards him. So maybe it's that knowing is having that trust, having that honesty, having those feelings, knowing someone well enough that you don't just see them and say, I remember your name because I recognize your face, but that you actually know them. You actually know how you feel when you are around them and how you feel when you can feel with them, right? When you can know what they are also feeling. Maybe that's what this recognition is, a higher recognition than just you look similar, but actually being able to feel for this person or these people a way in which you haven't for others.
When Rabbi Schatz and I were discussing this theme and trying to figure out where to take it, because there's so many applications, we decided to go, in addition to the many interesting things that you all have brought up, we had another hashlacha, another ramification that we wanted to take it to, and this is where we're going to go in that direction now. It has to do with the fact that we make choices, like Yosef made a choice. We make choices that govern the extent to which the people in our presence feel seen or feel a stranger in our presence. It doesn't just happen by itself. And this notion of being seen and being a stranger as being opposites that are very, very close together is interesting as well. One of my friends and teachers, Rabbi Jack Moline, says that in Jewish thought, the way we should think of opposites are not as 2 points on the opposite end of a straight line, but many Jewish opposites, like tameh and tahor, those categories of clean and unclean, which it's a terrible, pure, impure, terrible English translation of those phrases. They are the opposite ends of a certain spectrum, but Rabbi Moline says the way you should think of them is as if that line were curved around, and so the opposites are almost touching each other. to let you know that, right, like just has laughter and crying are the opposite emotional reactions, and yet we know that they're very, very keyed in together. So to know and to not know are the opposites. And in this scene, they're being brought very close together. To have someone feel they are really understood in your presence, and to have someone feel that they are a stranger in your presence, there couldn't be two different ways of treating someone, and yet the difference between them could be very subtle. Where our minds went to this was some of the headlines that we have seen over the last week and a half that emerged from what I consider to be a despicable editorial that the Wall Street Journal printed that questioned whether or not Dr. Jill Biden should be permitted to continue to call herself doctor because her doctorate was only in educational psychology or something like that and not in medicine, and that if you need someone to give you the Heimlich maneuver in the White House, don't rely on Dr. Biden to do it. There've been many, many reactions to that editorial, which again, I very much believe in an editorial committee deciding that even things that are objectionable should be read, right? That's the way ideas are brought out and treated as they're supposed to be treated. So we don't only print things that we agree with. That would just be echo chamberism. But some things don't rise to the level of deserving this amount of attention. I believe this editorial, my personal opinion, is in that category. But it actually has created a wonderful conversation that has to do with, first of all, the gendered way in which this often, not entirely, but often emerges, right? How women in our society and women in certain categories of educational achievement have to fight for their titles in a way that men do not have to. And how easy it is, sadly, how easy it is with your choice of how you address someone to either make them feel totally seen, totally beheld, totally recognized by you, or be turned into an utter stranger. And we talked about that in our own life as rabbis, right? And again, some of this is gendered and some of this is not. I'm just going to name it. For reasons that I think emerge both from good intention and also from some part of this broken part of our society, Rabbi Rebecca Schatz, who loves her name Rebecca and also loves that she earned the title rabbi, is most often referred to as Rebecca in our communal setting, when most people would not refer to me as Adam, even though I like my name, right? Some of that is indeed gendered, and we're still in the first 2 generations of women becoming rabbis in the conservative movement, and we notice it. I don't think people have like nefarious intentions when it happens, but there's a way in which we choose to call someone by what we want to call them rather than what they have chosen to be called themselves. And that instantaneously turns that person in our presence into a stranger, right? I'm not wagging fingers at anybody on this screen or who's watching. I want us to raise our awareness of what is held in our hands when we're in someone's presence and we're choosing to call them by what we want to call them rather than what they want to be called themselves, right? Is there anything more elemental than owning your name? Particularly if you've earned a title, is there anything more elemental than being addressed by how you know yourself rather than being addressed by how you want to know me, right? There's this wonderful phrase, we think we see things as they are. We actually see things as we are. We think we're just objective and we see situations and people as they actually are. They are almost always filtered through something that is present and real for us in the moment, and we see things as we are. So anyone who refuses to refer to Dr. Jill Biden as Dr. Biden, it's saying so much more about who they are than who she is. But her experience of that, either in a public or a private setting, is that rather than her being allowed to be seen, she's being rendered a stranger. Not all of this is gendered. I think some of you know this, that I was a rabbi in upstate New York for 9 years before coming to Los Angeles, and some of this is cultural and transcends gender. And again, I love my first name, and I need people in my life to call me by my first name. And I also think that the rabbinic title matters. There's a reason why most people don't go into their doctor's offices and say, "Hi, Jim," right? There's a reason why that professional separation allows for trust to be built and allows for the proper amount of authority to be present in those relationships. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. In 9 years, no one in my congregation, even once, would ever have called me Adam, certainly in a congregational setting. If we happen to also have developed a friendship outside of the congregation, we were on a hike, they were not going to be calling me Rabbi Kligfeld. But there was never a circumstance into which a member of that community would refer to me in writing or in person as anything but Rabbi Kligfeld, which, by the way, is how I had asked for, right? It was an honoring of the title that I thought made sense in my professional work. Los Angeles is different than New York. That's not a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? And so I'm now here 12 years, and they're still members of our community. And I'm not offended by this. It doesn't hurt me, but it's an interesting thing to recognize, who, even though it's very clear that I sign my emails Rabbi Kligfeld or R-A-K, and I'm known in the community as Rabbi Kligfeld, who in rabbinic settings, not in personal settings, will use my first name. Again, I love my first name. But it's just an interesting thing to recognize how we use our ability to let someone know how we see them and how we're choosing not to see them without necessarily, or maybe specifically thinking about how they're going to react in that moment. So there have been moments in my congregational life here at Temple Beth Am, and I've gotten over it and I'm fine, right? This is not a gripe session. This is a conversation about how this dynamic works in relationship, where instead of feeling at home and being seen for who I want to be, I'm rendered a stranger in that moment because someone else wants to call me by X when I'd rather be known as Y. There are places in this dynamic that are gendered in an ugly and painful way, and our society has to get past that. And there are parts of it that go beyond gender and relate to a person's willingness to not make another person feel like a nochri, like a stranger in their presence, but rather actually lehakirotam, to see them. When someone has earned a title by their training and by their education, they, and only they, I believe, determine when they are and when they are not addressed by that title. And when someone has earned lived out their name, right? They've really made a name for themselves. I think it's incumbent upon other people to recognize that by using the very name that they want to be known by. And that's how we allow people to be seen and not force them to be strangers in our midst. And that's a mitzvah. That's a beautiful, kind act, because we see in our scene how much imbalance there is when people are not recognized for who they actually are, and when they are made to feel as strangers. Rabbi Schatz?
Just before we close, as you were talking, it's very interesting to think about how we get our names. When I work with conversion students, I often explain to them that unlike your English name, which my parents' names are Dale and Tracy, but I don't go around and say, "Hi, my name is Rebecca, the daughter of Dale and Tracy." But when I'm called to the Torah, my name includes their names. And so when I'm working with conversion students to pick a name, I explain to them that in Jewish tradition, your name is not just your name, but it's a name that lives on in any children or any family that you choose to have. And they are also then known by your name. And similarly, when you go through a get ceremony, on the get, it is not just your name, but it is the name in which your partner called you as well. So nicknames or pet names or anything like that that you might go by, so that on the get, it is clear who it is, because there might be many Rebecca Schatzes. But if my name, Rebecca Schatz, is on a get, and it has all the other names that I might be called by the person who I'm in partnership with, then it's very clear that it's me and not some other Rebecca Schatz. And I think that this comes back to emotion and comes back to feeling, not feeling like a stranger, feeling like you've earned a title, like Dr. Debbie Mishik, who I did not call doctor when she read her Haftorah, and making sure that people feel seen, because that feeling is extremely important. Making sure that when someone is called by the name that they wish to be called, that you know that you're making them feel like what they're with you in that experience to do is being seen as held up in a certain way. And on the flip side, when my father calls me Rabbi Schatz in front of a bunch of ECC students, it's very cute for him. And it's weird because my dad calls me other things. And that feeling of having your father call you something that is honorific and I'm proud of is not to me as sweet or as intimate as when he calls me the things that he's been calling me since I was a child. So though Joseph is not talking specifically about names in this story, I do think it has to do with what we hear from the Orach Chaim, which is that feeling of belonging to these people who have come before him, but them not yet realizing that he belongs back to them. And that feeling of recognizing that he can see them. He knows who they are because he feels for them as siblings, and that they can't yet recognize him because they haven't allowed themselves to open up to what that relationship is.
So we wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and we always attempt to see you as you want to be seen. And if we don't, you should let us know. And we always appreciate and really take to heart when you see us as we really are. And that allows us to be in even more of an intimate relationship with you as we share this planet together. So with that, thank you, Rabbi Schatz, for creating this source sheet and for putting these sources together. And we're going to go into Musaf, which is basically going to be done on our own. But I'll announce the pages. We're going to do Musaf quietly, and then we'll conclude with the Aleinu and Mourner's Kaddish. Musaf can be found on page 185 in the Lev Shalem, 156 in the Slim Shalom, 430 in the Sim Shalom. It's said in a quiet whisper to yourself. We'll come back out with a short Nigun, Aleinu, Mourner's Kaddish, and do Kiddush. Yaram If you're still davening, please continue at your own pace. We're going to continue with Aleinu, page 205, page 183, or page 510. Please rise. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol latekru la'liotzer breshit shelo asanu kuvei haratzot v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama shelo sam chalkenu kahem v'gohor aleinu k'chol amonam v'anachnu korim mishtachavim limudim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. כתוב בתורה תחרניים לך לעולם ועד ונאמר בחיי אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו Echad. Mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 207, 184, or 512. Marlise, do you want to unmute and lead us to Mourner's Kaddish?
They're listed as Gary and Marlise, Kenji.
Yes, Gary and Marlise should be unmuted.
Okay. Yes,
Good.
Thank you. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yamad divrak hirtei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayachon v'yomechon. V'yedahol Beit Israel. V'agalav v'zman kariv v'yamru Amen.
Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevorach Leolam Leomei Almaya.
Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Leolam Leomei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'ramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei kudsha brichu.
Brichu.
Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'yamru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru Amen.
Amen. While I get the Kiddush ready, Rabbi Schatz, you want to just share any announcements?
Sure. I don't know that I have any, but tonight will be Mincha Mariv with our rabbinic intern, Josh Jacobs. I believe it's at 4:30. And then Zoom out of Shabbat will be at 5:30, I believe. This week is a short week in terms of programming because we want to be able to give our staff time off for Christmas. And next week will be the same in order for them to have off for New Year's. So we will have Shabbat services. I will be doing them from my parents' home, but we will still have Shabbat services on Zoom next week, and there will not be any formal programming on Thursday or Friday, though I will be leading an informal midrasha Thursday morning for both this week and next week. But I don't think there's any particular, is there anything you're thinking of, Rabbi Kligfeld? Any particular announcements?
No, I mean, usually you have like 17 different things that the community can participate in every day. So I just assumed that was continuing even though Hanukkah's over. But I guess you're allowed a break. I don't know.
I'm slacking this week. There's there's nothing in particular, at least that I'm remembering.
Then we ask everybody to rise for Kiddush, and then we'll wish each other a Shabbat Shalom. Bisham Rovanei Israel Shabbat La Shabbat La Dor Tam Berito Lam Beini Uvein Bnei Israel Lil Tili Lam Ki Sheishim Mimasaranai Tashmaim Darts Biyomashvi Shabbat Vaina Pashachor Shumashwa La Kadosho Sheishim Tabur Basit Komatecha Biyomashvi Shabbat Lanai Loecha Lo Tasek Komlacha Ata Unchavitecha Abdecha Macham Techa Vgercha Shirisharecha Ki Sheishim Mimasaranai Tashmaim Darts the Yamikol Shabbat Vayanach Biyomashvi Al Kain Beirach Aranai Jom Shabbat Vaikadosheyu Sarim Aranan Rabbanan Rabbatai
L'chaim.
Baruch Atah Adonai Mecholam Borei Peri Hagafen. Good Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good to see you.